Hey, it's Zane, and welcome to the very first interview-style podcast here on my channel. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side.
I can put millions of dollars into Bitcoin, millions. I personally have millions invested. That's the only asset that I feel comfortable positioning him in.
The thing to understand is that scarcity drives value. You know, for the first time in history, we've actually got an asset that is not just moderately scarce, it's absolutely scarce. You know, we know there's only 21 million Bitcoin that there'll ever be. This decentralized scarcity proposition that we've never seen in any other asset.
The reason why the banks are particularly hostile towards Bitcoin and digital assets is that it's going to retire them and make their entire industry obsolete. Somebody who's wanting to come in, put $1 million into our account, buy some Bitcoin and withdraw it to their cold wallet, they can all be done by one phone call and one email for the wallet address, and that's it. And that's how easy it is. This is generational. I've got a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, another one on the way. Everything I'm doing is not for myself, it's for them. My Bitcoin stack is not really my Bitcoin stack. It's really being inherited by my children.
Mr. Bisher Khudeira. Bisher, welcome, mate. Great to have you with me.
Thank you for having me, Zane. It's a privilege to be on, and it's always a nice time when I get to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I know you've just got off a pretty long flight, Bish, so how you feeling today?
Good, mate. Yeah, just touched in from Dubai, was up there, literally wherever I go, I'm only talking about Bitcoin. So I was up in, where was I? I was at the W Hotel in Palm Jumeirah, talking to people about why they need to add Bitcoin to their property portfolio, or their investment portfolio, I should say. So there was, it was a 2-day event. First day, people were talking about property and how great Dubai property is. And then the second day, they were talking about Bitcoin. And that's where I came in and, told them to, look, diversification is important and you should be adding Bitcoin to your portfolio as well, which was a good chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great to have you with me on this Sunday morning, Bish, and I want to get into a number of different topics today. I want to get into how you're seeing Bitcoin, not just on the macro side, but also under the hood, what's going on in Australia, why people are getting into Bitcoin right now. I guess I'm in a reasonably unique position myself. As you well know, I coach people in this space and have been doing so for about 9 months. So I get to have these, I guess, crucial conversations with people at quite a deep level based on their personal situation and why it is that they're looking to Bitcoin predominantly as a retirement asset. So we're going to get into that. But what I'd love to do, Bish, for those of you who don't know you, and I'm sure there's people within my audience who don't know your backstory, maybe you can start by just sharing a little about how you came into Bitcoin and to start StormRake.
Yeah, awesome. So for me, I was initially a foreign exchange broker. I was in the FX markets from about 2013 till about 2019. That was how I got acquainted with financial services in the first place. I came across Bitcoin in 2014 initially at around $200 a pop. I dismissed it. I was like, that's internet funny money. I'm an FX broker. I'm not going to waste my time with this stuff. I came back to it nearly a year later in November 2015, and I started to go through the rabbit hole, getting orange pilled like every one of us would have been. And I realized that it was more than just internet money. I realized that this is a genuinely global currency takeover, and it's got the hallmarks of the hallmarks and characteristics of an asset that could one day command a 20, 30, 50, $100 trillion market cap. At the time, it was less than a couple of billion. So I was like, this is just one of the most asymmetric opportunities I can come across. So I started investing in it in 2015. I went into the industry as a crypto broker in 2019. So I took all my FX broking skills and took it over to the crypto industry, which was an awesome time. I learned a lot as a crypto broker because it's, like you said, Zane, it's quite different from when you're investing in it to when you're actually looking under the hood and like part of the nuts and bolts operations of it. So I've been a part of the Australian Bitcoin scene for the last 6 years, quite involved on the day-to-day processing of, trades, withdrawals, deposits, and battling the banks as part of that process. And then 2022, I joined StormRake. It was initially a prop trading desk. Prop trading meaning that they were just running their own private capital in the market. They weren't taking investors on. They weren't brokering. They brought me on to set up the brokerage arm of the StormRake business. Now we got about 8,000 clients, about $500 million worth of assets under management, and we process about 50 mil worth of trading volume every month.
Wow. So it's been quite a meteoric rise, Bish. Did you kind of
Yeah.
expect that this was going to happen, or did you feel that? Yeah. What were your thoughts sort of when you guys kicked things off back in 2022?
Well, I was always bullish on the business. I was bullish on the industry and the asset class. Obviously, during that time, we had to navigate things like FTX, Celsius, Luna, Three Arrows Capital. There was a lot going on. BlockFi. There was like everywhere you look, there was like centralized businesses just collapsing, exchanges going down, Bitcoin going from 60 down to 15,000 US dollars, people calling for it to go below 10, right? So it was like a landmine of like, it was just craziness to just start the business at that time. But I'm really glad that we started it in the middle of the bear market, because it allowed us to have really good values and entrenched really nice airtight operations. So now that when things are good, we can still manage and maintain our business without being overly greedy or not putting in the right practices in place. So in the beginning, it was incredibly challenging, because you could imagine, Zane, being a Bitcoin broker, it's very much a love-hate relationship with your clients. Sometimes they love you, sometimes they hate you.
Yeah.
And so I'd be calling them in the middle of the bear market and they're like, "Oh, sorry, Bishop, mate, I gotta go. And it's just like, they hang up. Now, the phones don't stop ringing. People want to buy, they want to buy, they want to buy. So it's very interesting seeing the juxtaposition in the market between $15,000 Bitcoin and $120,000 Bitcoin, because it's just completely two different processes. But nonetheless, it's still the same BTC. Bitcoin does and works incredibly well, regardless of the price point that it trades at. The network continues to operate. It's just the value of the digital asset is the monetary premium that's subscribed to it. So yeah, it's been unreal. I've really enjoyed every single minute of running this business, because it's been such a privilege, because now I've really got to see what it takes to go from startup to scale up to medium business to enterprise. And now we're in the process of acquiring a few businesses of our own, other businesses within the industry, to bolt on to the StormRake service offering to continue to strengthen it. So it's been one hell of a ride, and I'd run it back 100 times over.
Yeah. Now that's awesome to hear, mate. And one of the things that I love about you, and I know that I've sent so many people your way over the last several months, and the feedback I always get is that, you guys take things to the next level when it comes to service. But just on a personal level, a lot of the feedback I've had from people who have actually had, I guess, really meaningful conversations with you personally about why they should be deploying into Bitcoin and taking this seriously. Yeah, it's just been fantastic, because I find, certainly from where I sit, Bish, as a consultant or a coach, whatever you like to call it, the biggest thing that people need when they're getting started in an asset like Bitcoin is education. They need clarity, they need confidence, they need to put their training wheels on. I've got a saying, start low and grow. And so just to have you in the background to help reinforce that message, and to let people know that they don't have to buy one whole Bitcoin, they don't have to put in their whole net worth into this thing. They can just do things stage by stage, step by step, as they get more confident. So would you say that, just having those coal-face conversations with people in terms of the service you guys provide has been a really beneficial thing?
Absolutely. I mean, having on-ramp myself personally close to 8,000 individuals into the Bitcoin ecosystem, just with StormRake alone, not including my previous efforts at other firms, I know what it takes to get somebody from, real trepidation, real uncertainty to complete conviction, because we're not trying to sell this pipe dream of put in $10,000 and you become an overnight millionaire. The great thing about Bitcoin is that you get to become rich slowly. Right. And that's the trickiest part in this entire journey, is that people have to be calm, be cool, be patient, focus on their craft. A lot of people come to me running either they're farmers or sparkies or plumbers or accountants or lawyers. I tell them, the first thing I say, don't quit your day job, right? Don't quit your day job. Don't try to overtrade this stuff. Just come into the market, enjoy what Bitcoin is as an asset. Let it, like I love what you just said, start low and grow. It's like a good brisket, low and slow for a long time. You get really good quality results. So that's what we want people to do. Come in, enjoy this market, and then focus on your craft, because there's a lot of people out there that are doing great jobs in the world, and they have to render an amazing service to us fellow Aussies. Not everybody needs to just become a Bitcoin trader. That would be a really sad society to be honest with you. So yeah, we tell people focus on your craft, whatever excess income you have after you've paid for your expenses and for your family lifestyle, then you go put that into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is ultimately a savings technology, in my opinion. And then that's what's going to allow you to grow your wealth over time. Because yes, you put in 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand over time. And then as Bitcoin continues to climb, and because it's liquid 24/7, 365, you can call upon it anytime you wish. So instead of putting your savings into a net bank saver or a gold saver where they'll give you $50 for leaving the funds in there for another 60 days or whatever it is, some piddly amount, you can actually have your savings being put to work for you. And that's what I love about BTC, is that you don't have to become a trader. You can just focus on being an investor and you'll get far better results with less stress.
Yeah, and I know there's a number of people out there in this space, Bish, who often refer to Bitcoin not as a trading position, but as a wealth position. And I know that you're big on really reinforcing that message, and that's the thing that I really share with people a lot. And the thing that I find often is that even really smart people have got this wrong. People who have come into Bitcoin, maybe they didn't quite do the proof of work on Bitcoin. They haven't done the hours to really understand what this asset is and how transformative it is. And so they've come in and out of the market only to kind of regret that they sold their Bitcoin. Do you find that as well? Often that, people who had a bit of a history with Bitcoin, they've sold it only to regret it?
Yeah, all the time. And this is the thing that people do, is they always full stack trade. Full stack means that you've got, let's say you've stacked up 1, 2, 3 Bitcoin over time. And then people are making buy and sell decisions on whether they're going to get rid of their whole stack or rebuy again. It's really, I think that's just, look, if you want to do that, you can do that. I'm not going to stop you. But this is the crazy thing. People don't realize I'm a broker. So the more you trade, and with the bigger size that you trade, the more money I make. So I'm actually telling people and talking people out of doing more business with me in a way. So I'm really got your best interests in mind, right? It's like, I could tell you I can do this podcast circuit and I can tell people, yeah, you got to trade level to level, buy and sell. And then all that happens is I walk away with a new Porsche and a new Patek and I just have a great lifestyle. But that's not what it's all about, right? I don't want my wealth and I don't want my success to come at the expense of other people's portfolios. So I'm genuinely telling people and talking people out of doing business with me. So the reason why I don't think full stack trading is really good, because you'll come to make one trade that you'll deeply regret. So, but that's not to say that you can't sell Bitcoin. I always say, use Bitcoin as a savings technology and spend it where it makes sense. For example, my wife is now pregnant with our 3rd child, due Feb, and she's looking at her car and she's going, I can't have our 5-year-old, a 2-year-old and an infant in the back seat. That's too small. I need a bigger car. So what I'm going to do is, because I don't hold Aussie dollars, I'm going to sell down some Bitcoin and buy her a new 7-seater Outlander with all the trimmings and everything like that. She'll really enjoy it. And so that's really what it boils down to, is that I don't decide whether I'm going to wake up one day and full stack sell my Bitcoin. But if the time comes for it, a holiday, a new car for my wife, I can easily make that decision, because I don't have to worry about where am I going to find the funds. I don't have to chuck the car and find. I've got the liquidity to be able to make those decisions and purchases. And then as the next month rolls around and I close the books for StormRake in, say, October, I'll buy back some more Bitcoin as well with the excess earnings. So it's just a really easy way to scale your Bitcoin base without having to try to time the living daylights out of the market.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, Bish, that because we've had this conversation before, and you also addressed my Bitcoin Success Circle community when we were doing our live trainings, and I really appreciated your insight that you shared. And I know everybody who was a part of that training, the feedback was just first class, so again, thank you for that. But I recall you sharing with us during the training series, you've got a message on your wall in your trading office. You've actually got a couple there, but one of them, it says, over trading leads to underperformance. Do you want to just share with the audience, Bish, why you're so big on that? I mean, and like you said, this kind of goes against the grain of you as a business, but I think it really speaks to your passion for educating people on assets like Bitcoin and putting that first rather than your business needs first. I guess your business is just benefiting just from you really giving people what they need to hear. So yeah, maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit too. Bish, in terms of trading and how often it leads to underperformance in a portfolio.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great way to create the right investor mindset and the right mentality. So this goes back prior to my days in cryptocurrency. This was going back to my days as a foreign exchange broker. I was about 21 at the time. It was 2015. The guy that I worked for brought me into the boardroom. He goes, I want to teach you something. This was day 2. So imagine 10 years ago, young Bisher, energized, ready to learn. Second day into the office, he brings me into the boardroom and he throws up 3 numbers on the board, 90/90/90. And I said, he goes, what's this? I said, 3 sets of 90. I don't know. What is it? He goes, 90% of traders lose 90% of their deposit within 90 days of depositing. And I'm like, wait. He goes, yeah, the odds are, because we were an FX broker that was taking the other side of the trade. So if somebody was long, we're short. If they're short, we're long. Anyways, so he goes, the reason why we position our book that way, or our trading book that way, is that it's far easier seeing clients lose money than trying to talk them out of being reckless and over trading. He goes, as long as we just do the right thing by them and give them a clean trading environment, we'll just take the other side of the trade, because they're going to over leverage and lose their funds. So 90% of traders lose 90% of their deposit within 90 days because they can't help themselves. They either over leverage, they trade in and out, they put on really tight stop losses, they get stopped and then it goes in their direction. Then they put on like really tight take profits, then it hits and then it goes through it. And they're just continuously getting chopped up. And they end up losing 90% of their funds within 3 months of making a deposit. It's really sad to see. And so that was a philosophy that I wanted to move away from when I was in crypto broking, because in FX brokering, almost all of it is you're on the other side of your client's trade. Whereas when I went into crypto, you're actually aligned with your client. You're matching the order in the market, you're finding it on the exchange. Because like, for example, at StormRake, we face 20 different exchanges to find people buy and sell prices depending on what they're looking for. So we're always hunting it out of the market rather than taking it on ourselves. And that allowed me to say, look, guys, don't overtrade, because it's the worst thing you can do for your portfolio. It will lead to underperformance. What I meant by underperformance is Bitcoin is the benchmark. Bitcoin is the hurdle rate. People haven't been able to outperform Bitcoin in the last 3, 4, 5 years because they've been exposed to alts or they're trading with leverage. There was a bunch of people that got completely wiped out a couple of weekends ago. We had $20 billion worth of long orders get liquidated. And we were doing the Inner Circle Success webinar series before that liquidation event. We did three sessions over 3 weeks. A couple of weeks before that had occurred. And I was saying, guys, don't trade with leverage. You will get wiped out in a black swan event. We don't know if it will happen, when it will happen, but just be careful, because that's why we're in spot. You buy the exact asset. So let's say you buy 1 Bitcoin, you spend $165,000. That's it. You can never be liquidated. You can't be stop hunted. You can't have your funds taken from you. You put your Bitcoin in cold storage and that's it. And that's the cheat code. That's what's really hard, is that people have to be incredibly patient, have the fortitude, have the wherewithal to stomach the volatility, but also sit on their hands, which is a genuinely difficult skill set. But yeah, that's why it's overtrading this underperformance.
Yeah, that's great insight, mate. And one of the things I've often heard Michael Saylor say is that, when you look at Bitcoin, one of the things that can be disconcerting to the newcomer, to the uninitiated, to those that perhaps haven't done the homework on Bitcoin and aren't here for the long haul, they can look at a Bitcoin price chart day to day, and I often say, imagine if you had a price chart for your house, right, day to day. I mean, we don't have that, right? But imagine if you did, you'd probably freak out, right? Because housing also moves in cycles. But the reality is that Bitcoin is the most liquid asset we have, trades 24/7, 365. And quite often the very fact that you're able to open an app on your phone, right, and you might have deployed 10 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand the day before into Bitcoin, and you see a dip 5-10%, we know that Bitcoin can easily move 5-10% in a day. It's quite common for it to do that. And invariably, if you do go and put 100, 150, 200K into Bitcoin, there's a really good chance it is going to dip the next day. And the reality is that if you couldn't see that price chart, you'd be none the wiser, right?
Yeah, correct.
So I think the very fact that, we have all of these tools in this trading world, in this commodity space, it probably doesn't help the newcomer, right? Because it can definitely conjure up some anxiety and stress when they're looking to deploy meaningful amounts of capital, only to find that it could dip the next day.
Yeah.
But we have to keep coming back to the fact that we're not here for tomorrow. We're not here for next month. We're not even here for next year. We're here for where this thing's going to be in 3, 5, 10 years from now. Do you agree with all that?
Absolutely, mate. This is generational. I've got a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, another one on the way. Everything I'm doing is not for myself. It's for them. Am I going to enjoy myself along the way? Absolutely. I'm traveling the world, talking to people about buying Bitcoin. I'm staying in really nice hotels and experiencing really nice stuff. So that's okay. You can experience good life. It's not to say that you have to live like a pious austerity monk style lifestyle, but I'm saying what you need to do is go out there, focus on your craft, and just allow the market to come to you, and just spend time in the market rather than trying to time the market all the time. And I'm doing this for my children. I want them to enjoy themselves. I want them to have a great quality of life. And so my Bitcoin stack is not really my Bitcoin stack. It's really being inherited by my children. And then hopefully I've instilled in them good values, good monetary practices, good ethics, so that they can maintain that as well and grow it and pass it on to the next generation. And that's what it's all about, being able to preserve your wealth and preserve your standing in life, and also to appreciate where you could be, because, you can come into this as a young man or a young woman, 21, 22 years of age. You're looking at how am I going to get on the property ladder? It's beyond me now. You can't even save your way there. Even if you do a 5% deposit requirement and you end up into a 95% loan to value ratio mortgage, which you're going to be spending 40 years paying off. So you go, okay, well, that's not really an option. You try to go to the stock market. Stock market returns are between 8 to 10% per annum on average. You then go to precious metals. It's about 12, 14% per annum on average returns over the last 50 years. Still good. We're starting to get better. And then you come to Bitcoin, and we're going straight to like 25% return on average, right? Over the last, call it 5 years. It's actually a lot higher than that, but I'm giving a more conservative estimate moving forward, just so that people don't try to marry those higher expectations. Because if I say to people 20 and then we do 50, then people are like, wow, that's really good. But if I say 50 and we do 40, they're going to be really upset. So always set it up. But yeah, for me, it comes down to, I'm not doing this for a 6-month, 12-month, 2-year position. This is generational, what I'm doing here.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's exactly the reason why I'm in Bitcoin, Bish, because I'm actually going to be a grandfather in December. So,
congratulations, man. That's epic.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So one of the joys of having kids young is that you get to have grandkids fairly young, all things going to plan. So we're really delighted to be entering this phase of our life as well. But mate, I want to get into, banks, what you're seeing with the friction that's happening in the banking system right now. I want to talk a little bit about self-custody, the macro picture, and maybe even, if we have time, a little about Australian real estate and how you see the future for that as it compares to something like Bitcoin. But before we jump into that, I'd love for you to just share, for people who, are thinking about getting into Bitcoin at a meaningful level, and they're looking at the broader crypto market, and they're thinking to themselves, well, Bitcoin over the next 2-3 years, it might 2, 3, 4x, but there are these altcoins there that could 10 to 50x. Why would I go and put 10 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand into Bitcoin when potentially I could do a lot better in one of these altcoins? So maybe you can just sort of share your insight as to how you see Bitcoin fitting into the cryptocurrency landscape from your perspective as not just a Bitcoin broker, but also a cryptocurrency broker as well. And maybe you can share maybe the percentage of trades that you guys do relating to Bitcoin versus every other crypto.
Yeah. It's really, there's a lot to unpack there, Zane, and it's one of the most contentious conversations I have, because it can be quite divisive, especially in the crypto and Bitcoin community. So let's break it down. A lot of people say, okay, well, great that Bitcoin can do a 2-3x over the next little while, but I want 10x returns. So that's why I'm going to go to the altcoin market. But you have call it 10% probability of getting a 10x within the altcoin market, or you can have yourself an 80 to 90% probability of having a 2-3x in Bitcoin. And then because we're a degenerate gambling nation and we have sports bet in ads halfway through the footy, we go for the 10% for 10x, right? But from a balance of probability perspective, you want your investments to favor higher probability setups, because why you want higher probability setups is that you can actually position larger amounts of capital into it. So if you've got a 90% chance that you're going to lose all of your funds and a 10% chance that you're going to 10x, you can only really afford to put, relative to your overall portfolio, let's say you got 100K to deploy, you might only be able to put 10K in, right? Because if you get a 10x, you've pretty much doubled your entire portfolio. But if you dust it and it goes to zero, then you've only lost 10,000. So you size your position relative to the risk versus the reward of the inherent position you're taking on. Whereas with Bitcoin, I can put millions of dollars into Bitcoin, millions. I personally have millions invested. And when somebody comes to me with selling their real estate portfolio or selling their stock portfolio to buy Bitcoin, that's the only asset that I feel comfortable positioning them in. Like I had a lovely lady, she's one of yours, and she runs a quite a successful business. And she came to me with $1.5 million. She goes, how do I put this into the market? I say 1.45 into Bitcoin, and then maybe just leave some around just in case you want to take an opportunity, or leave some capital around for a DCA into BTC or whatever it is. But don't deploy anything less than 90% of your funds into Bitcoin. That's the way you should be. I said 100%, but my initial positioning was 100%, but they were really keen on exploring other alternatives because they wanted to have a bit of a trading position on. So I said, look, let's lock down 90% of it in Bitcoin, and I wouldn't feel comfortable if we go less, but it's up to you if you want to. And then let's position the rest of it in a couple of other layer ones, whether it be Ethereum or Solana or Hyperliquid, but that's about it. And so for me, my positioning is 10% of your portfolio should be at risk if you are wanting to take on more risk. You can take on more risk with alts. You can take on more risk with leverage. You can take on more risk, doing all kinds of manner of things. But keep it to quarantine.
Treasury companies, ETFs.
Treasury codes. Yeah, exactly. ETFs, different purposes. And then just quarantine it to a small portion of your portfolio, because you want 90% of your stack in Bitcoin cold storage, right? And let's say you've, got 1 mil, 100K, 10K to deploy. It doesn't matter. The principle still applies regardless of how much capital you're bringing to the market.
That's really great insight there, Bish. And so, one of the things that we often talk about, everybody, is when it comes to Bitcoin, the thing to understand is that scarcity drives value. For the first time in history, we've actually got an asset that is not just moderately scarce, it's absolutely scarce. We know there's only 21 million Bitcoin that there'll ever be. We know that there's about 95 to 97% of it that's already out there. It's already been mined, which doesn't leave a lot still to come. So, people just have to realize that when they're deploying capital into something like Bitcoin, what is the value proposition that is going to continue to take care of them and their capital into the future? And it really is this decentralized scarcity proposition that we've never seen in any other asset. So, for me, it's all about Bitcoin these days. And we're going to talk a little bit about real estate towards the end here, Bish. But one of the things that I've shared a number of times with my community is a block of land that I purchased here on the Gold Coast about 3 years ago. And when you price that land in Bitcoin, even though it's gone up in Aussie dollars, probably by about 30%, it's actually fallen in Bitcoin terms, what I would say real money terms, hard money terms, by about 75%. And so the thing to understand is that Bitcoin, what really drives its value is scarcity, the fact that it is the only fixed and finite form of money we've ever had, and the fact that we've got this seemingly unlimited global adoption that is coming for this asset class, and the biggest pools of capital on earth, institutional money, nation state money. So yeah, I'd love towards the end here, Bish, to get your thoughts on the macro picture and where you think Bitcoin's going and its value proposition into the future. But what I'd love to do, mate, is just change gears here for a moment and just talk about banking. And I would say that, pretty much every week now I'm meeting people who have had trouble getting their money out of their bank into an exchange or into some form of a platform in order to buy Bitcoin. And I know that you've been very much at the coalface and you've made some changes to how you guys are helping people manage through this situation. Maybe you can start by sharing why you think, or why it is that the banks are becoming increasingly hostile to people withdrawing their money to buy Bitcoin.
It's because Bitcoin is genuinely the best alternative we have towards the fiat banking system. So what it boils down to is it's like the horse and cart manufacturers and the horse breeders having an issue with the car industry back when, Henry Ford created the T model. So it's really interesting to see legacy industries being able to disparage and attack competing industries. And yeah, there's going to be a bit of a fight, being a bit of a battle, but really what it comes down to is the reason why the banks are particularly hostile towards Bitcoin and digital assets is that it's going to retire them and make their entire industry obsolete. And so what they're trying to do now is, for the ones that are actually smart, they're actually trying to adopt Bitcoin. For example, JP Morgan has come out and accepted Bitcoin and Ethereum as collateral. So you can deposit Bitcoin and ETH, or you can be able to borrow from them on the basis that you have Bitcoin and a bit of your wealth in Bitcoin and Ethereum, which is astonishing considering that Jamie Dimon a few years ago, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, called Bitcoin drug money, right? A money laundering index is what he called it. Now they have gone and changed their tune to such an extent that one of the world's largest investment banks, in the form of JP Morgan, has come out and said that they are accepting Bitcoin and Ethereum as collateral and recognizing it as pristine collateral as well. So that's a really big change for the market. But our Australian banks, as much as I have some of my mates and some close friends in the banking industry, they're really behind the times, right? And they have no understanding of how to adapt and adopt this technology, because it could genuinely strengthen their banking operations. But because this is an economy and a country that has done so well off real estate and ripping resources out of the ground, that Bitcoin isn't really something that is even on the periphery of interest. And so for us, it really boils down to the fact that there's going to be some banks, particularly American ones, which are at the frontier, adopting Bitcoin as a savings technology and using it in their operations, which means that they can live long as part of Bitcoin's growth story. Whereas CBA, ANZ, Westpac, NAB, they're all going to zero, unfortunately. Not that I want them to employ a lot of people, but yeah, they're going to miss out on this amazing opportunity because they're trying to collateralize and manage their banking system on Aussie dollars. And AUD is going to zero. So by virtue of what it is that they deal in, they're going to zero against the assets that they're holding. And so because they don't hold any Bitcoin and they only hold fiat currency, then and a quite large mortgage book, then that's the problem that they're facing.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And I guess the banks are going to do all that they can to protect their patch of grass for as long as they can. Do you see
Absolutely.
a point where the Aussie banks are going to be actually forced into a corner to adopt this or die, or do you see that we're decades away from that being an issue?
Look, there are some murmurs of adoption going on around the banking scene here in Australia. I was actually recently approached by a headhunter who wanted me to come across and work for one of the big four in a head of digital asset position. I said, I'm very happy with where I'm at. Thank you very much. But there are banks that are wanting to put out digital asset desks. And for them, they might put it as like a separate division at arm's length away from the operations of the business. And they might outsource or recruit someone like myself to run that business. But that will happen, and that is happening now. But I don't see it being folded into their business anytime soon, just because of how our economy is structured. It's structured on real estate and mining. So Bitcoin and technology if you've ever been in a fintech provider or a technology provider in Australia, you've almost always had to go to the United States to get meaningful funding and support. And we've actually had a lot of our own homegrown technology go overseas to get the appropriate level of funding that it needs to be taken care of. And so that's really a big problem here. It's not just related towards Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's technology as a whole is not really nurtured and taken care of here in Australia.
Okay. And so let's talk about, I know you guys recently moved away from one of the big four banks in terms of your payment rails. Maybe you can share how that has been and, what people are experiencing now in terms of getting Bitcoin or getting their funds into StormRake. Are you finding that everything now is fairly seamless?
It's a good question. I mean, we were dealing with one of the big four banks, and we almost every day they would freeze our account or put it on hold, and it would just make our entire daily operations a living nightmare. And then I would have to spend 4, 5, 6 hours of my time navigate and like, look, I'm not trying to big note myself here, but I could do a lot with 4 hours of my day in terms of the business I run. And so I had to spend 4 hours navigating the bank hold and the bank queue and going in branch and trying to get it unfrozen. It just was a nightmare. So we moved away to a different alternative, which has been, to be honest with you, one of the best decisions we've made in our business. It's really helped support our clients' deposits. We work quite closely with we have a genuine banking partner now, which makes it really easy for us to navigate. So whereas before, when we were dealing with the big four, they wouldn't even ask us a question around a large transfer coming in. A large transfer, $1 million comes into our account, they'd freeze it straight away. And it would spend the rest of my day trying to explain what it is that we do to another person who doesn't really care. And so it was really frustrating. Now, whenever we have a large transfer come through, the bank says, who's this? What's this about? The client already explains what it is that they're making the transfer for, which is to purchase Bitcoin, and we get to receive it from a banking partner who knows exactly what our business model is about. So it's been a really fortunate change. That doesn't mean that everybody has instant deposit success with their bank, because we still have to navigate it from the sending side, but it's made our life as a receiver a lot easier. But in terms of the sending, for my clients, I say, look, be honest, be transparent. You've got nothing to hide. You're not doing anything illegal. You're not doing anything immoral. You're sending some Aussie dollars and you're ending up with some Bitcoin. And you're dealing with a Melbourne-based, AUSTRAC registered, fully compliant Aussie business. Fully compliant to the extent that I have to now get this, Zane, I have to pay payroll tax now. I've employed so many Aussies, I have to pay the State Revenue Office 8% of my annual payroll. Go figure. So we do everything by the book. We comply with all the rules and regulations. And that means that you as an investor have your rights protected. And that means that the bank under no circumstance can decide how you can invest, because you're doing everything onshore and you're dealing with a regulated Aussie broker. You're not sending your funds offshore. You're not dealing with some operation out in the Maldives or British Virgin Islands. You're dealing with a homegrown brokerage, and there's no reason why they can stop you.
Yeah, and that's great, because, I've had people, Bish, who have reached out to me and have said, my bank is blocking my transaction because they think that where I'm sending my money is a scam, or, they don't know anything about it. And so, are you sure that this is okay? And they just ask for reinforcement from me. And I'm just going to say, well, I use StormRake myself. My whole family have used them. We've all had trouble transferring our own funds from the traditional banks that we're a part of into other exchanges. But one thing I have found, Bish, is a couple of things. Firstly, I've found it a lot more frictionless, so a lot less friction utilizing you guys just in its own right. Just getting money out of my account into StormRake for the most part has been pretty seamless, and pretty much everybody that I deal with has said the same thing. But on the occasion where there has been a problem, I just find that you guys having a real person to talk to be able to pick up the phone, just kind of calm the nerves a little bit, just talk them through it, let them know, just give them a bit of guidance as to how to deal with their bank, particularly for people new into the space, mate. I found that that's been really, really a valuable thing. And this is why I always encourage people who, if this is your first time getting into Bitcoin and you're in Australia and you're wanting to do this in the most stress-free, frictionless way, even if you're transaction funding your account, even if it was to be blocked by your bank and you had to explain yourself to your bank, just having access to Bish and the team to help you through that process, it's kind of priceless, I would say, when it comes to getting started. Because at the end of the day, if you're making a decision to get into Bitcoin, you don't need, at your very first step, getting a roadblock. And so having a full service brokerage in your corner, I think, is one of the most valuable things. Would you say, Bish, that's the feedback you've received from people who have
Yeah.
come from trying to utilize exchanges and come across to you?
Well, first of all, thank you. It means a lot that, part of why we've built a human-based, service-based business first and foremost is so that when somebody hits a roadblock, in this case, we're talking about the banks and deposit being a roadblock. But what if you're trying to deal with a trade? What if you're trying to deal with a withdrawal? Most of the time, the banks make it really hard to deposit funds into a brokerage or an exchange. And then exchanges are making it really difficult to withdraw. And so you're really stuck in this really hard circumstances where you finally navigate the banks, you get 10 grand onto an exchange, and then the exchange puts your account on hold, and then you have to, the wallet needs to be then held up for 24 hours, and then you can only withdraw a certain amount per day at certain KYC levels before you start having to hand over, thousands of pieces of information about your life. So what we do is we've really simplified the whole process. Whether the issue is deposit or trade or withdrawal, just pick up the phone and we'll get it done for you. And that's the whole reason why we've got that phone-based, email-based service, is that somebody who's wanting to come in, put $1 million into our account, buy some Bitcoin and withdraw it to their cold wallet, they can all be done by one phone call and one email for the wallet address, and that's it. And that's how easy it is. And so imagine how much time you would need to spend out of your day to put $1 grand, 10 grand, 100 grand, $1 million in through the banking system, and then at the exchange to withdraw that steadily and slowly. That could take a K deposit, could take 10 to 20 days to withdraw out of an exchange. It's just insanity, right? Whereas when you come to StormRake, you can deposit as much as you like. We'll jump on the phone. Hey, Zane, how much are you looking to put into BTC? Okay, whole clip, no problems. We put the whole clip into BTC. We then withdraw it. We do a test transfer to your nominated wallet. And then once you confirm it's received, we'll send the full balance across. The whole point is to make it easy. And then whenever you face any issues, give us a call. I've hired 34 employees. The 34 employees. At the start of 2024, I had one. Nearly 18 months later, 34. So, and the reason behind it is because we have more and more people coming in through the door, and every one of my clients gets a dedicated broker that they get to work with. Of course, I'm accessible as well, but they have somebody dedicated within the business that they have their direct line on, which they can call 7 days a week. You don't get that anywhere else in the industry.
Yeah, and Bish, maybe you can speak to, how it works that you guys are remunerated for your service, because a lot of people think, dealing with a full service brokerage, it's kind of more expensive. But, even if you take into account the service you guys offer and how much easier it makes people's life and their confidence levels, maybe you can share with us just how your pricing or your fee structure works and why people shouldn't be alarmed at all.
Absolutely. Well, we have a flat fee model. It's 2% brokerage fee, and that's it. And what I mean by that's it, we don't charge things like spreads. We don't charge things like withdrawal fees. We don't charge things like slippage, price premiums. I won't go into naming names, but there's a few exchanges out there which put a large price premium over the spot price of BTC. So right now, BTC is trading at around 165,000. You can buy it from most Aussie exchanges at around 168,000. Right? And so you're buying well over the spot price, sometimes between 1.75% to 2.5% over the spot price. And that's just not worth your while. Now, let's say you go onto an exchange where you're not doing an instant buy and you're trading on the exchange on the BTC AUD order book. The BTC AUD order book is paper thin. So let's say you want to buy $100,000 at market, you're going to face something known as slippage, which is you'll see the price at 165, but to fill your entire order, you end up executing at 167. And so even if you go at the market section on an exchange, your not getting the best quality price execution. Whereas with us as a broker, we charge a 2% flat fee. So on 100 grand, we'll take 2,000 for services rendered. 98K will be put into the market at the best available price, which is almost often spot price. And that's how we can get our clients more Bitcoin or more sats per purchase, comparing us to an exchange. So I wouldn't want to call ourselves cheap, because that's not what we're trying to position ourselves as, but we're cost effective, which means that your dollars get you more sats per purchase, and you can stack us up against other exchanges to be able to verify that for yourself.
Yeah, and what I love about what you guys do is there is complete transparency when it comes to the fees. And I often show people, Bish, just on a handful of exchanges. I often, during my coaching sessions, I'll share the price disparity that exists between certain exchanges. We won't name names, but it can be on any given day 2.5% price difference between where you can, what you can buy Bitcoin for today from one exchange versus another. And a lot of people don't really pay attention to that. They're just saying to themselves, oh, this exchange charges me, 0.5% or 1% or whatever it might be. They think they're getting a great deal, but they're not taking into account, that extra premium, I guess, that they're paying in terms of the spreads that you're speaking about there. So
Correct.
Guys, when you deal with StormRake, you do it safe in the knowledge that you're getting as close to spot price, market price that you can possibly get. I always kind of like to explain it that you're essentially buying Bitcoin at wholesale, because instead of retail. So Bisher and the team, they're going into bat for you to get you as much Bitcoin or as many sats as you can on any given day. And for their service and having access to them and having seamless withdrawals and all of those things which are invaluable in this landscape that we're in right now, you're just paying a flat 2% fee. So for me, it's a very, very small price to pay for everything that you guys do. Moral of the story, guys, don't be nervous if you're just getting started. If you've had problems in the past, adding to your stack, just deal with Bish and the team, and you'll find that things are just much, much more seamless for you. And you can sleep at night knowing that not just will you on board with your Bitcoin, but you'll be able to withdraw it, which is a new thing that's coming up where exchanges are now saying, no, you must keep it with us, which is a whole other conversation, mate. We could dedicate a podcast to.
Absolutely. One thing I did want to say though, just in quick closing, but I really appreciate the wrap up you've given for our execution services, but I cannot share how important it is to connect with Zane and get his education and his knowledge, because as a broker, I wish I could sit down with my clients and give them, one-on-one coaching and consulting about, all of the things that they can do with regards to Bitcoin, how to set up cold wallets, all that. I have to specialize my time in execution services. That's what I have to focus on. That's a full-time job. I'm working 100-hour weeks just focusing on the execution, right? And being able to be a reliable on and off ramp for people to be able to buy and sell. That's my focus. Whereas every single one of you who are listening to this, you need to be working with Zane as your dedicated coach and consultant, because he's got the best education in the industry to be able to make sure that you get good education from Zane and you get good execution from myself. And when you marry good education, good execution, you end up with a happy investor. And that's what we want to take care of you guys on.
Yeah, I appreciate that, mate. And look, I have had tremendous feedback from people who, are fairly new to the space, even people who've been in a little while and they've made a few mistakes. And I think the biggest thing with all of this, it just comes down to mindset. And sometimes just having somebody in your corner just to help you really simplify things and just alleviate any stress or anxiety. It can be one of the most valuable things that anybody can do. So what I want to do is just get into a conversation about self-custody. Now, I know that as a brokerage, you guys offer a service whereby people can actually store their digital assets and their Bitcoin with you in a vault setup. Maybe you can kind of speak to that. And I'm a huge advocate for self-custody. That's what I believe in and what I believe everybody should get to as quickly as they possibly can. But of course, there is a cohort of people out there who just getting into Bitcoin is kind of a big step. And sometimes they want to take their time before they get into the next phase, which is really learning about how to be their own bank and be responsible for their own money, and that can be quite a nerve-wracking step for most people. Even though it's simple, we always like to say it's not it's just new. It's just new, and anything new just requires you to go on a bit of a learning journey. And I guess this is where my coaching and my community comes in too, because we really help people with that. But what would you like to share, Bish, around self-custody? Are you an advocate for it? And maybe what type of people are choosing not to self-custody and to leave their assets with you?
Yeah, just to unpack that, I mean, for me, self-custody is the goal. So everybody should work towards learning how to be their own custodian, how to hold their own assets, because that's the whole point of being a Bitcoiner is that it's like having zero counterparty risk. You don't have to take on anybody else as to be the arbiter of your assets or the caretaker of your assets. Bitcoin, when held in self-custody, is really the gold standard, if you will. Me, I'd say, yes, go towards self-custody. Use Zane, learn how to self-custody properly. But whilst you're getting started, don't delay, don't wait to learn how to self-custody to get exposure and get stuck into Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin with me through a simple phone call and a bank transfer. So let's do that first. We can put your assets into our cold storage vaults, because our cold storage vaults at StormRake is multi-signature geodisperse. So and more often than not, clients are withdrawing to oftentimes just a single signature, single location cold wallet, with a set of seed phrase and then one set of like a hardware device. Whereas what we've got on our end is multi-sig geodispersed, not on site. So that's part of the reason why people would want to use our custodial services to begin with. But that journey might be, you might hold with us for a month, 6 weeks, 6 months. That's not a problem. You give us the wallet address to withdraw. We'll do a test transfer. You'll get a phone call from the StormRake team authenticating the request. Yep, Zane says yes, go ahead. And then we send across the full balance upon test confirmation being sent our way. And that's it. And so for me, I'd say, yes, self-custody is important. And every single person who invests in Bitcoin, true Bitcoin, should learn how to self-custody. But don't let the desire to learn how to self-custody delay you from getting started. Get started, use StormRake, we'll keep your assets safe for you. And then when it comes time for you to withdraw and you've got all the hardware and the seed phrase set up correctly on your side, and you've got the appropriate security mechanisms on your side, and more importantly, redundancies. God forbid anything happened to you or your keys, you've got backups. So when you've got all of that in place, then you can be able to withdraw. And look, if you come to me day one and you want to withdraw Bitcoin to a hot wallet, for example, I'll still do that. It's not like you have to have this full gambit set up to be able to withdraw from our platform, but it does come down to like I would call it a knowledge continuum. So as people get started, they know very little about Bitcoin and Bitcoin self-custody, but they know that they need to hold some Bitcoin. So they start with us, they buy a little bit of Bitcoin, and then they learn how to hold it themselves, how to generate keys, how to generate a public wallet address, how to send it on. As their knowledge level increases, so does their investment level, and so does the need for them to self-custody. So if you start with $10,000, you can start with us, no problems. Let's get you started. Then as you learn more and you get more comfortable with Bitcoin and you start investing 50,000, 100,000, $500,000, $1 million, as you learn more, you're getting more and more bullish, you're investing more and more, then you should be self-custodying. And that's the kind of continuum that we talk about.
Yeah, I really love that, Bish, that continuum, because I often reinforce that message by saying, again, start low and grow, but it's not just in terms of your allocation to Bitcoin, it's also in terms of your education. And so if you're coming into Bitcoin, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to feel like you need to know everything there is to know about Bitcoin, because there are so many rabbit holes you can go down. I mean, I've been in this space for going on 7 years now, and I still feel like there's so much to learn. I mean, I learn something new every day. And so I think for anybody out there who says to themselves, well, look, I don't really understand this enough yet, or I've got to learn about that, or now there's this self-custody thing, or I've got to learn about hot wallets and cold wallets and all of these different layers to your learning curve. Don't let that kind of hamstring you, if you like, from moving forward. I think that's what Bish is saying. Learn enough to know that this is a place to be allocating some portion of your financial life, be it your savings, be it your superannuation, be it capital you're rotating out of other assets. But then just know that it is a journey of learning that you're going to go through. Knowing that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start, you know? And so I really love that, mate, the continuum. And I think it's where a lot of people get stuck, just feeling like they've got to know everything before they get started. But that's certainly not the case. Now, as we're getting to the back end here, Bish, because I know it's a Sunday here and I want to make sure you got plenty of time with your family today, mate. I really appreciate your time. Let's talk about Bitcoin as money. I know you're a big advocate for Bitcoin being utilized not just as store of value, but also a medium of exchange. Maybe you can just share with my viewers just some of your experience and your thesis around Bitcoin being peer-to-peer money.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's really three main ways you can unlock the value of your Bitcoin outside of just holding on to it indefinitely. And that's part of the strategy. You buy, you hodl, you become wealthy, nice and easy. But then how do you unlock that value? Option number one is you convert your Bitcoin into local currency, whether it be Aussie dollars. I'm flying off to Dubai tonight, and so I'm going to convert a portion of my Bitcoin into Emirati dirhams with a local Bitcoin dealer for cash, right? So I'll take with me 20,000 Aussie dollars worth of Bitcoin. I won't spend 20,000, but I might take out 10 grand just so that I can make sure I can enjoy myself in the UAE. Plus the Dubai is a very expensive city, by the way, guys. Tax free, but very expensive. But my point is that you can you can convert it. And that's really what I encourage people to do. And myself, I'm a living, breathing example of that. I have about $500, $800 in my Big Four bank account right now. And that's all that I hold. I have $800 in my bank account. That's it. And so my wealth is in Bitcoin. So to unlock that value, I need to convert it into local currency, or option two, which is you can spend it in kind. So there are a lot of places in the UAE that you can spend your Bitcoin in kind, and that's not a problem. Whether you're talking about luxury car rentals, you're talking about apartments and properties can be bought and settled in Bitcoin, or you can buy watches, luxury watches, Rolex, Patek, APs, in Bitcoin. That's something that you can do over there. No problems. There's no concern there. And so you spend it in kind. And then number three, you get to borrow against your Bitcoin and get fresh dollars against it. So you put up, say, $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, you borrow 50 grand, you're at a 50% LVR. That's option number three. So whether you spend in kind, whether you convert, or whether you borrow, there's different options for you to unlock the value of your Bitcoin. And each of them have different pros and cons, and we can step that out in a later podcast. But those are the three main ways. I personally like to keep it simple and just convert my currency or my Bitcoin into local currency because it's more widely accepted. So Emirati dirhams, AED, is far more accepted than Bitcoin is in the country. However, there are pockets that accept BTC, no problems. In Australia, one of my favorite pubs to go to is the Fox Hotel in Collingwood, which is around the corner from our office. They accept Bitcoin. So my team and I, Friday lunch, we duck out of the office for a second, grab a few pots, a few schooners, and then we get into a Palmer and then we pay for it in Bitcoin, no problems. And so, but if we go to another pub around the corner, they only accept Aussie dollars. So I'd convert my BTC into AUD and go from there. So, and you shouldn't be looking to spend your entire stack. If you're spending your entire Bitcoin investments, probably got a spending problem and you need to cut back a little bit. But I'm not a financial coach, so you can spend however which way you want. But Bitcoin can have its value unlocked through a few different ways. I've just outlined them.
Yeah. And how far in your mind, Bish, do you see, or how long before you feel that it's going to be a situation where we can go down to our local barber or mechanic or coffee shop and actually spend Satoshis, using our Bitcoin hot wallet? Do you think that's sort of decades away or years away? What do you see coming?
It'll be slowly, then suddenly, my friend. It'll be over the years. It'll be slow increments. More and more people are accepting it, and then it'll be almost an overnight adoption of it all. It's similar to how all technologies go through this 0 to 100 moment, whether it was the radio, whether it was the television, whether it was the internet, whether it was smartphones. They all went through their own 0 to 100 moment. So radios were adopted slowly, and they were almost a military use only before it became completely ubiquitous. Televisions were the same. In the beginning, it was only exclusively available for the ultra wealthy. Then it became available for everyone. Then you had the same thing with the internet. We had the old dial-up. Then we had broadband. Now we got high-speed Wi-Fi. I'm on the plane. I'm getting high-speed Wi-Fi, 40,000 feet in the air, 30,000 feet in the air, no problems. Whereas 20 years ago, the idea that you could, send and receive messages whilst you're somewhere over the Indian Ocean as I'm coming back home to Melbourne would have been a completely different idea, would have been completely unfathomable. And that's what's going to happen with Bitcoin as well. There'll be this 0 to 100 moment where it just becomes ubiquitous overnight.
Probably like Uber and taxis or Netflix and Blockbuster.
Absolutely. Exactly.
I mean, they're fairly recent examples as well. So, Bish, what I'd love to do is just maybe just spend a couple of minutes before we wrap here, just talking about Australian real estate and where you see Australian real estate going and how this ties into Bitcoin. Like I said earlier, I tend to spend quite a bit of time these days thinking about property because I've always been into property and always seen it as kind of the apex asset in Australia to own. But what's interesting to me is a lot of people are booking coaching sessions with me these days who are in real estate. Now, they're either real estate agents who can see that this price thing in Australia is unsustainable, property developers who can see the escalating costs, or they're investors who own vast rental property portfolios, particularly in places like Victoria where they're just getting taxed to death and the rates and the land tax are just kind of strangling them, and they're looking for an alternative, and they're coming to Bitcoin in their droves. Where do you see Australian real estate going, and why do you think that Australian property perhaps is not the investment today that it once was, and why people should be looking at digital real estate instead in terms of Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, part of the reason why I was going up and back from Dubai and then coming back to Melbourne and everything, a good friend of ours, which you've appeared on his podcast, Adam Hudson, he was there doing a 2-day seminar. One day was on property and the other day was on Bitcoin. And he himself said he's pretty much reduced all of his property exposure down to where he lives and a caravan park, I believe, that's it for him. Everything else is in Bitcoin, right? And so, and a couple of other, niche investments, but he's mainly gone towards the Bitcoin route because he goes, Bitcoin doesn't call me. And the reason why he said that is because he goes, man, I had property out the wazoo. I had so many doors. I had thousands of tenants and all this. He was a property mogul, right? Investor. And he goes, man, I'm done. I don't want, Bitcoin never calls me up on a Sunday when I'm having a coconut and I'm sitting by the beach. I'm just there. I'm holding my own assets. I can go to Bali, Cyprus, wherever I want to be. And I've got my own wealth with me. I've got liquidity. I've got assets on demand, which is amazing. So really what it boils down to, a lot of smart people, you, Adam, myself, a good friend of mine, Sammy and Tim, these are my boys, right? You guys are my brothers. And the reason why we've all reached the same conclusion, which is to avoid Australian real estate like the plague, is that we can be in better positions that are far more liquid, far more callable, far more transferable, and allow us to escape the Australian tax net without having to continuously kiss the ring of the ATO. Why does the Australian government push Australian property so hard? Because it's one of the easiest assets to tax, right? There's a fixed address with your name on it. So of course they want to pile people into Australian property. Of course that's why they want to pile people into Australian industry super funds, because they're really easy, low-hanging fruit that they can tax from here till kingdom come. Whereas with Bitcoin, part of the reason why they're not a big fan of it is that your Bitcoin and yourself can leave tomorrow, end up anywhere on the planet, and you've got your entire net wealth and your entire liquidity with you in your pocket or in your brain if you're doing one of those brain wallets where you just commit the seed phrase to your brain. But in any case, the whole point of it is that Australian real estate, not even just from a perspective of growth, because of course Bitcoin will most likely outperform Australian real estate over the next 10 years. So there's a bit of a opportunity cost. You either hold real estate and underperform Bitcoin, or you buy Bitcoin and outperform real estate. Happy days. But it's about freedom. It's about freedom, being untethered, being able to go anywhere you want in the world and be able to do what you want and live your life on your terms. That's really what it matters. That's really what it boils down to. So if the government was to go and become tyrannical, or it already is, and they go and say, well, you're going to get locked down and you're going to wear this and you're going to do this and you're going to take this medication. And if you don't do it, you can't even see a cafe and you have to hug your grandma wearing a plastic bag and all that kind of ridiculous stuff. Then you can just say, you know what, I'm going to take my net wealth to where, and my wealth where it's treated. You move your Bitcoin with you in your cold wallet over to wherever it is in the world you're wanting to end up in, and that's it. So Aussie real estate, two things. You're most likely going to end up underperforming Bitcoin, and two, you're tethered to the Australian tax net. So that for me is just the two reasons why I'm avoiding Australian real estate. That's not to say that there will come a time where I don't see it attractive. I think Australian real estate is completely overvalued, in my humble opinion. Take it with what you will. I'm a Bitcoin broker, so I'm obviously a bit biased. But at the same time, 10 years ago, 3,000 BTC is what it took to get the average Australian home. Now it takes 5. Within another 10 years, it'll be 1. 10 years after that, 0.1. Little bits of Bitcoin will be able to buy you a ton of real estate. So if you're really a real estate lover and you're listening to this going, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, sell your real estate, buy Bitcoin, not financial advice, of course. And then if you really love your real estate, come back and buy 10 times the amount of real estate that you could have just by holding Bitcoin.
And guys, just to put a cap on what Bish is saying, I mean, I've done the real life exercise on this, just on this piece of land that my wife and I purchased 3 years ago. Now, at the time, this block of land has got a couple of old homes on it that were built in 1971. And the thing is that block was $1.5 million in 2022. And even though it's gone up, you know, market value of that's probably up 33%, up around the $2 million mark. And if we were none the wiser, we'd be just going, happy days, Australian real estate, it's performing, how good's this? But because we are the wiser, because we are sound money advocates, because we are understanding what Bitcoin is doing and the fact that it's repricing real estate, I go into the exercise. At the time, that $1.5 million could have bought me, instead of that block of land, 42 Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin at the time was hovering around the $30,000 mark Australian. Now today, Bitcoin is up to around the 160, 170 mark. And so the price of that house, even though it's gone up from 1.5 to say $2 million in Aussie dollars, it's actually fallen from 42 Bitcoin, right, 3 years ago. Now it's, what's that, about 12 Bitcoin. So it's down like 75%. To put it another way, how do I put that 1.5 million into Bitcoin instead of the block of land? It'd now be worth over $8 million.
Wow.
So these are the things, these are the light bulb moments that property people, and like I said, it's not just me saying this, I'm getting people who are in property coming to me and saying, Zane, I've started to learn about this Bitcoin thing. I need your help to really get me off on the right foot here. And these are property people, you know. So I think gradually, like Bish, like you were saying, people are starting to wake up, and very soon we're going to hit a phase where this is a suddenly thing. And I think we're going to see a real flight to Bitcoin. So mate, what I'd love to do just to finish off here today is maybe just on that note, you can give us your forecast for where you see Bitcoin going over the next, say, 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, in terms of adoption, in terms of its price. What do you got to share with us on that to finish off here, Bish?
Yeah, absolutely. So before the end of the year, I'm still calling for Bitcoin to be hitting 150,000. There's about $20 billion worth of short orders that would get liquidated when we get back above 120,000, which would take us to 150 pretty quickly after that. So I still remain short-term and near-term quite bullish on BTC, despite the sentiment being a little bit mixed as of October 2025. Moving forward, say 12 months out, BTC at 200K is my near-term target or annual target for next year. Because if we get to say 150 by year end, that's not a bad position to be in. And then we have like a 30-40% up year in 2026, takes us to around 200K US, 200,000 US dollars. And then say 3 to 5 years from now, it'll be most likely a global reserve asset trading amongst nations, because a lot of nation states don't trust each other. The Russians don't trust the Americans don't trust the Chinese doesn't trust anyone. So the way it's all going to work is that Bitcoin will become the world settlement layer for large nations to be able to trade with each other, because they don't trust each other. They don't trust the yuan, they don't trust the ruble, they don't trust US dollars. So that's going to become a pretty obvious reason as to how global adoption will continue to increase, because of how fractured the world is from a geopolitical standpoint. Bitcoin being sovereign and neutral and anybody can trade on it, I think that'll be a great way for the world to move forward. But that's kind of where I see it. And then 10 years from now, mate, I probably be retired somewhere in the Mediterranean, sailing across and having a great time, because Bitcoin will be in, who knows where it'll be at that stage, Valhalla. So I'll be having a great time. And hopefully I'll be chilling in the French Riviera, you and I, and having a couple of mimosas on a Saturday, 10 a.m., 10 years from now.
Absolutely. That's the thing, guys, is we got to understand that, with Bitcoin, we're building for the future. I always say that when you hold Bitcoin, the future is brighter, and you have to keep remembering that. And so, I'm in the camp, Bish, that I think Bitcoin is going to 10x between now and the year 2030, and then who knows after that. But there's many out there who predict that within the next 10 years, so not the next 5, but the next 10 years, we're going to something like 100x. So it's a very interesting times. I think it's all going to come down to capital rotation, mass adoption. We just got to keep remembering that Bitcoin is the only truly fixed and finite form of money that humanity has ever seen. And not only that, like Bish was just saying, it's decentralized, which basically means that it's trustless. And so not just individuals who are wanting to escape the matrix, but even corporations, and as Bish was saying, nation states, they're going to want to settle in a trustless form of money, because let's face it, the US dollar and the US has abused its powers as the reserve currency holder over many, many decades. And so people are, and institutions and nation states, they're all looking for ways to settle in a form of money that is trustless and that nobody can stuff with, corrupt, it can't be changed, can't be printed. And so I agree with Bish. I think we're going to transition from this medium of exchange, store of value, medium of exchange, and then into this unit of account where Bitcoin is going to be recognized and utilized as a global settlement layer of value. So Bish, I think on that note, I just want to say a big, big thank you, mate, for your time today on this Sunday. My very first episode on my interview style podcast on Bitcoin with ZT. Mate, let's do it again in the months ahead, and keep up the awesome work with what you're doing. Keep looking after Aussies who are getting into Bitcoin. In my mind, you guys are doing God's work. You're doing a great service for Australia and humanity. So keep it up, mate. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Zane. It was such a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you, my kind friend.
And guys, if you liked the episode, please share, please like, please leave a comment down below. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for being a part of the community, and we'll see you in the next one.